In this video, we're going to show you how to build a mid-century modern end table using end table legs and dimensional lumber from Osborne. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. For this project, we're using the 5/4 and the 4x1 true stock, as well as our square end table legs. We're going to be using the 5/4 to create the top and bottom panels for this table. The top of this table will be 18 inches and the bottom shelf will be 15.5, so we can cut them both at the same time. To get started, I'm cutting all the boards down to roughly the right size, just slightly over the final length, and then I'm going to take them and run them through the benchtop planer to bring them down to a final thickness of 1 inch. This is where the 5/4 lumber is a great use. It comes in at over 1 inch thick so that you can plane it down and get it to the final specs for your project. For the bottom shelf, I chose to plane the lumber down to 3/4 of an inch just to make the table feel a little slimmer in the end. Once the lumber has been milled to the final dimensions, we can apply some wood glue to the seams and add some clamping pressure while they dry. While our panels are drying, we can start working on our end table legs. For this project, we chose a 21-inch square turning blank from our website for the end table legs. Turning blanks are a great option if you're looking to customize your table legs a little bit, as they don't come sanded like a regular table leg would. For our project, we chose to take the final thickness down from 2 3/4 to 2.5 inches, so just removing a little bit of material there. Next, we can add a mortise to the table leg that will accept the tenon that we're going to create on the skirt boards later. I find it easiest to cut mortise and tenons for legs like this on the router table, but you can use the tools that you have available. Just avoid removing too much material at once, as it can be unsafe on some tools. If you're interested in a full tutorial on how to create custom mortise and tenon joints for your project, you can check out the video above or in the description below. Now that our table legs are ready, the next step is to work on the skirt boards for this project. For this part, we're going to be using the 4x1 true stock lumber, as it comes in at a true 4-inch wide board, which is perfect for a table skirt. The space between our table legs will be 12 inches, but we will be adding a 1/2 inch tenon on either side of these boards, so I'm cutting these to 13 inches long to allow for that dimension. Next, we can set our router table up to cut a 1/2 inch tenon with a 1/4 inch shoulder on either side. Once again, if you're interested in more info on this process, you can reference the video below. Once the tenons are cut, I like to remove just a little bit off the end to make sure that they sit flush against the top of our table leg. When we cut the mortise of our table leg, we left a small roundover at the bottom of the mortise, so this is going to make sure that there's plenty of room and it's not going to stick out past the top of the table leg. The next thing I want to do is add a little bit of detail to this table skirt and give it a more mid-century feel. I decided to go with a curved cut on these skirt boards to accomplish this. To do that, I used a protractor to trace out a curve on the plywood template that I can use as a guide for my router. I'm using a bandsaw to cut the template as perfect as I can, but this can be touched up using a sander later. Next, I'll cut the rough curve into the skirt boards using a bandsaw, but I'll make sure to stay away from my line about 1/16 of an inch so that the router can touch up the rest of it. Next, we can attach the plywood templates to the skirt board using tape. Then we can use a flush trim bit on our handheld router to perfectly smooth out the profile to match the template. Now that the parts for my table base are done, we can sand the skirt boards and the table legs and get ready to assemble the base. To start assembling the table base, we need to add some dowels and a cross brace to the bottom of the legs that will be used to support our bottom shelf. For this, I'm going to use a Doweling Jig that will automatically center to the middle of the table leg. Now I only need to add 2 supports for this shelf, and they will be parallel to each other on the inside of the table base. Once the locations for the dowels have been marked, I can pre-drill into the centering jig using a drill bit that's roughly the same size as the wood dowels. Then we can cut the length of these shelf supports to 12 inches, which is the space between our table legs, and we can rip them down the middle at roughly 2 inches apiece. Then we can drill the same size dowels into these shelf supports, which will allow them to match up with our table legs. Finally, we can add some wood glue to each of the pre-drilled holes and install the dowels as well as these shelf support boards. Now that our shelf supports have been installed, we can add the table skirt boards to the top using the mortise and tenon joinery that we created earlier. I'll add a decent amount of wood glue to the mortises and use some clamps to keep them in place while they dry. Now that our table base is complete, we can move back to working on our top and our bottom shelf. I'll start with the top and cut it to a final size of 18 inches by 18 inches and sand it to 150 grit. Next, I wanted to add a chamfer on the edge of the tabletop to give it a mid-century feel. This is a common profile seen on mid-century modern tables, and I thought that it would fit this table nicely. Once again, using a hardwood like red oak, it's important to avoid removing too much material at once, so I chose to do several light passes for this profile. Next, we can add the tabletop attachment for this project. For this, we're going to be using the figure 8 fasteners from Osborne. We also offer Z-clip fasteners and pocket hole attachment at Osborne, depending on your preferences. For this, I'm using a 3/4 inch Forstner bit to mill out the holes for the figure 8 fasteners. If you're interested in more details on how to install figure 8 fasteners, you can check out the video above. Finally, we can center the table base on our tabletop and install using the other end of the figure 8 fastener and a proper length wood screw. The last step for this project is to cut and attach our center shelf. For our project, we need to cut this to 15 inches wide by 12 inches long to fit in the section between our table legs. This may change depending on your project dimensions, so keep that in mind when working with yours. Next, we can slide the center shelf onto the support boards and clamp it down so that we can turn it over and install using the figure 8 fasteners. Keep in mind this center shelf is only 3/4 of an inch thick, so you may need to change the length of your screws to avoid popping through the top side of the shelf. Now that our table is assembled, we can add the wood finish of our choice. For this project, we chose to go with a warm cherry to add to the mid-century look. So let's apply a finish and take a closer look. Thank you for joining me for this episode. If you're interested in any of the parts used in this build, you can check out the links in the description below. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment, and we'll see you next time in the Builder Studio.